Welcome back. And Tracey, you were going to share a story with us.
Yes, I am. Another tale from the other side. This one is a very beautiful story. Um, and it actually is a preview of something that I've seen for my mother. And because time is not limited, sometimes we can see things. And I'm very glad to say that my mom is still with us. And I've told her about this experience that I saw of her. My mom is in her 80s right now, physically living in her 80s. And I saw ahead of time what her transition would be like. And my mother deals with a lot of fear. She's sort of a reluctant soul and lives in a very isolated way. She's very busy, she's very active doing things, but she spends a lot of time on her own. And she has a lot of health fears and concerns. And she's such a good girl that she is very good, like making sure she walks or takes her medicine or the things that she needs to do. And in her future transition, I saw her walking on the other side. And she looked identical to what she was. Her head was down. She was being very careful that she not misstep or anything like that. And her attention was drawn to the edge of she was at the edge of a beautiful grassy field, and her attention was drawn to the tree line at the far side. And her dog, Cindy, comes bounding out of the woods toward her. And she sees her and calls to her and says, Cindy. And she starts to move toward her. And as she moved, it's like the years just disappeared off of her. And she became younger and younger and more fluid in her movement. It was so beautiful. And so I firmly believe that my mom will be reunited with her dog when she transitions. It was a very important person in her life, her dog Cindy.
And how did, when you told your mom, when you shared her the story, how did she react to that?
You know, I'm so lucky and so touched by my mom's reception of what I do. We had miscommunication through, probably into her 70s, between the two of us. A lot of things that didn't sit well, misperceptions of each other, etc. And we didn't become close until after my father passed. And it's like her eyes opened to, and her judgment, her preconceived ideas of how things should be just sort of, they didn't melt away. She still has them, but she started to see me for the first time in my life. Mm-hmm. And we were able to connect emotionally. And she is fascinated by the tales from the other side that I share with her and the different things that I do. And she's my number one supporter of my radio show. And
that's awesome. But does she have some gifts like this too? That maybe does she have the gifts like you do?
Well, she's Scorpio, so I would say it would be impossible that she doesn't, but she has had to wrestle with
beliefs,
a certain degree of psychosis.
Oh.
And no, it wasn't beliefs for her. It has more to do with injuries that she suffered when she was younger, and that implanted a lot of fears for her. So she trusts what I tell her when I've channeled my father for her, which was interesting because I realized when I did that, wow, people have a different relationship, like the way he was with her and the types of things that, they discussed or that he wanted to address was completely different than his relationship with me. For me, he's a supportive dad. For her, there was an awkward relationship, and it was great to have the insight into their relationship that I wouldn't have known. It makes sense to me, but I wouldn't have known otherwise.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now, are the people who've crossed over trying to communicate with us here in this realm, in the physical realm?
frequently. And sometimes I think of it that a reading is basically like a reunion. And I learned that when a spirit is looking at a loved one from the other side through a medium, they can see them much more physically than they could otherwise. They can be around them, but I've had several people say, "Oh, it's so good to see you." And I thought how odd that is, but they showed me that the portal that I create as a medium from the other side to the earth creates a certain clarity of vision for them, as well as for the sitter who is connecting with the person on the other side. And they do have messages, and I've had clients that have helped in the soul evolution of the person on the other side. Maybe there was a tremendous need to render an apology for harms that were done or neglect that was perhaps unintentional. Different relationships are so complicated. They're not just like mom, dad, kid, brother kind of thing. They're very intricate. And I just had a client the other day. I asked her during her reading to speak to her husband, her ex-husband, because he couldn't hear me talking. I could read him and I could feel him, but he was not open to anything until she was able to talk to him. And when she was able to say, "I understand why you were the way you were. I understand why things went the way that they did. And I love you and I forgive you," it transformed his energy. It became a tremendous change for him and facilitated his next step. That same type of thing occurs when we release a soul to the other side, when we help someone understand, that they have an opportunity to change. It's just amazing to, so yes, they do have messages to convey, and they're very urgent. And it may be, for some, they're not able to go through their life review until they have passed on a message. For others, once they have had their life review, they're able to pass on those messages. And for those that might not be familiar with the concept of a life review, we all have that expression, "My life passed before my eyes." Yeah. But this is something more profound, because when we're on the other side, we experience not only our life, but our words and actions, and we become the other people in our life and experience them as if we were the other person. So, for instance, a pedophile is going to feel what it was like to be the child. And that is how our consciousness is raised, because there is no punishment and there is no reward. Our will is free when we are out of body. But why?
Can I skip that part?
Pardon?
I said, is there a way I can skip that past life review and do it now before I get to the other side?
We all would like to pass that. And that's so interesting that we have a choice when we get there about when we're ready for that. It's not like, someone just came through a horrible death through lingering cancer and, loss of limbs and all that kind of thing, and then they're popped onto the other side and like, boom, let's deal with it. They're given time to heal and to recover. They're given time to prepare themselves. There are people that are like, not going to do it, not going to watch it, and they just come back, and they may be the less evolved spiritually.
Actually, I'm ready to really, in some ways, because I've been thinking about this. It's like, I'd rather just do it now.
Just get it over with. Well, I wonder, I
don't know.
I think everything is possible. So I know people that have had near-death experiences that have gone through their life review while they were allegedly in a coma here.
Interesting.
So
that is interesting.
Why not in a deep trance?
There you go.
Just don't go to the edge there, Roger. Too close.
No, I'm not going to the edge. I can just do it where I'm at.
I
Yeah.
think part of it is that sort of like when we agree to come into this life, we sign the clause, we say, okay, I'm going in for a certain number of years. It's in our life contract. I'm going in for X number of years. I'm going to meet up with so-so and so-so, and I'm going to try to accomplish this in my time there. And then we have that clause like, and we agree to the amnesia. And we sign off, we're like, okay, and I agree to take the roofie, and we come in here and we don't remember who we are. Sometimes children do, you hear those stories of kids that are very aware of past lives, etc. But
my brother was like that.
oh, really? That's interesting.
My brother, when he was like, oh gosh, 3 or 4, used to tell us about, because we were raised in LA, and so he was 3 or 4, and he would always tell us about his wife and kids in San Diego, and he had a Lincoln Continental, and just like it wasn't just like a story. These stories about like kids will tell. It was like very specific,
Detailed.
Very cool.
And then, of course, what was the response to that? Ha 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 ha! How cute! How funny!
Yes.
But I because he's 10 years younger than me, so I was old enough to remember that.
Yes.
And it was very, very interesting as I got older and more aware of stuff like that. It's like, wow, that's really interesting. I haven't talked to him about it, but I should.
Yes.
It would be interesting to talk to him about it, see if he remembers what he was talking about.
Yeah.
Did he ever say a name?
I don't think he ever said a name. I don't remember that, but it was like he had daughters in a Lincoln Continental, and it was San Diego.
That's so cool. I think our conditioning as children does often distance us from our natural abilities and our gifts.
Oh yeah.
Maybe a toddler senses that their great aunt is sick, and they toddle over to them, and they just want to put some healing hands and give them some love. And that person says, "Get off of me, get down," or people are ridiculed for what they perceive. And also, as I was saying earlier about the language of the earth plane, we learn words because people don't hear us telepathically when we come in, for the most part. So if we say, my diaper's wet, telepathically, nobody's listening. And then we're like, my diaper's wet. Could you please change it telepathically? And no one's listening. So what do? We start to cry, and then we learn to vocalize for our needs. And we get so wrapped up in the language of the physical world that we forget that there is that other aspect to ourselves.
And language causes such confusion and misunderstanding. And
the Tower of Babel.
It does.
Yep.
It does. Yes, it does.
So, Tracey, I have one more question, and then we're going to probably have to wind this down. What about the people who die quickly, like unexpectedly, an airplane crash or a bad accident or something like that? Have you had experience or a tale from the other side on what their experience is like?
Yes. What happens is they get rocketed into that alter space. So they're basically shot out of their body. And if you've ever had an accident where you were fine one minute and you're not fine the next, your brain has to catch up with it. It's sort of that Monty Python skit of, the guys that are dueling, and he cuts the guy arms off, and the guy keeps fighting, and he cuts the other arm off, and he's like, "Oh, it's just a flesh wound."
That was so funny.
That's how shock works, and it's a protective mechanism. But our mind, our perception, is what is shocked. Yeah. And so when someone is boom on the other side, they may not realize, and that contributes to a great deal of the population in the tweener zone that I was talking about before, because people don't realize that they have passed. And so I was reading for a gentleman that was in his 70s, and it was probably epic in my mediumship because there were like 14 people that came through evidentiarily for him in like an hour, and all of them, we had stories and things to tell. But he had been he had flown before, I guess Air Force, and there had been an accident, a helicopter accident, and there were injuries that occurred, and there were survivors that made it out of there, and there were people that didn't. And there was one particular soul that was stuck at the scene of the helicopter accident. He wasn't aware that he had passed, but he had such a feeling of guilt that he wouldn't be able to be with his family. Like he had deserted them, like his sense of moral obligation to provide for his family. And so he had a reluctance to go home because he felt like he had done something bad by dying at the scene of the accident. So he was like kind of caught in some kind of loop of trying to fix it, but not being able to, and feeling that sense of responsibility. And there were others there too, but most of them had been able to transition. And so we worked with him a little bit to explain to him that he had passed and that it was okay, and that years had passed and his family was grown and, not as he remembered it. And, he was a little bit more able to start thinking forward there. But tragedy, sudden death, sometimes suicide, but more maybe in situations of murder, those are sometimes people who feel like I need to be able to explain to people. Some want the crime solved, they want justice and, to kick butt on the person that did it to them. Others just want to let people know that they're okay, and that, it just depends. A lot of murders that occur are, personal or drug related or something. So there's a lot of confusion on the part of the soul that is crossed over. And, it's not our job to go fix it for people because we each have our soul journey. But on occasion, there's the rare time that you can lend a hand.
Yeah. I was thinking of like the people who you would say, they never saw it coming, right? They go to bed and they wake, they don't wake up.
I have a perfect story for that. I had a client who came to me initially to talk to her son that had passed, but then she came to me beyond that because she wanted to develop her gifts so she could talk to her son who had passed. And the occurrence was that he was a teenager and he had been sick, and she walked into the room and found him dead the next morning. There was no transition. There was no expectation of that at all. And she was very concerned about the process of his passing. And she was also concerned whether or not he had committed suicide with some of the medications that were involved. And it was going to be months before the autopsy report came back. And what I heard was that there had been a drug interaction that was unintentional. And she's like, that's not possible. But when the autopsy report came back, it verified that. But that there had been a drug interaction. He had not intended for that to happen. And so the way he described his transition, he was sleeping and his grandmother came into the room, and she had passed, and she came up and she sat down by his bed and she started patting his hand and sort of bringing him to awareness of where he was. And she is the one that explained that to him, that he had passed. And he was like, "Oh no, no, my mom will kill me," you know. and he was just amazing. But it's so interesting because during the reading, I got a ring that I was wearing. It had a little wire that was loose, and it got caught on the shirt that I was wearing. And I said, "Oh dear," you know, I got all awkward because I'm trying to channel her son, and my ring's caught. She said, "Well, ask him to help you with that." And so I just stopped messing with it. I let go of it, and the ring fell off the sweater.
Oh.
Wow.
And it happened twice since then. And now I ask him to help me detangle stuff. but he has improved a great deal since he's gone on. He's learned that he can move around really quickly and fast. He loves to travel. He likes to, like, Pluto, poosh, you know, like he loves that speed that he can get because he's free out of body. And it's just been a beautiful thing to see his energies rise and collect. And I think that it's a great deal due to the fact that his mother loves him and had wanted to participate in that process. And now he's advising her on pulling her life together and encouraging her to move forward in her life because he's fine now. And
that's great.
Yeah.
These are great stories. Well, we could go on all day with these stories.
Absolutely.
They're awesome. And I keep thinking of more things I want to ask and have you talk about, but you know,
we'll have to have you back.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back.
I would love that. I would love that.
But before we go here, I want you to be able to share with our listeners the services that you offer. I know you do workshops, and so just share a little bit about what people can find out about you on your website and things that how they can connect with you. And I think you have a special offer you want to talk about.
I do. Well, my specialty is private readings, and I also do private psychic tutoring. So if somebody wants to develop their gift, I will work with them one-on-one, and it's not a course, it's not a certification, it is taking them from wherever they are forward. And I love working with people and seeing I feel my approach is that I'm going to show you what you can do rather than what you can't do, and that's what's going to develop your confidence and move you forward.
Nice.
I do private readings. They're an hour. They're normally $120 for an hour, but if they mention the word empower you on their call to me or in an email, or if they prepay on my site, they can take $30 off. So
nice.
It would be 90 instead of 120.
Thank you.
And, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you. And so my website is mediumtracylockwood.com. You can find out anything you wish. And I only have one phone number so far. I plan to get a second one at one point, but they can reach me directly at 540-998-9789. I do not do readings impromptu. They will be scheduled, but I do readings for international people by Skype, and I do readings within the U.S. by phone. And of course, if they're in the Roanoke, Virginia area or able to travel here, I have my offices, my professional offices.
Great.
Very nice. Thank you so much, Tracey. This has been fascinating.
Yes.
And we will definitely have you back on for more tales from the other side because...
Oh, that sounds wonderful. Thank you so much. A distinct pleasure. Thank you, Janet. A pleasure.
Thanks.
Pleasure
Thanks,
having
Tracey.
you here.
Nice meeting you, Roger, too.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on Empower You, and look for more tales from the other side with Tracey Lockwood. And next up on our list, I believe, is Lynn Andrews. So we'll be talking about shamanism and the different stories she has learned from the various teachers in her life. So look for that in the next couple of weeks. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.